right, so this is going to be another movie review. This one's called Strangers on a Train, 1951. Giving it 2 out of 5 stars. I was very disappointed by this. The only reason to watch her, the strangulation scene and the funny ending. Other than that, it's one of Hitchcock's worst movies, I think. And it's a shame because Farley Granger was such a great actor. My favorite Hitchcock movie is Rope, which he does a wonderful job in 3 years prior. And he was supposed to be the next James Dean, but he never made it big, despite being in a number of Hitchcock films. Alfred Hitchcock, Strangers on a Train. It starts with the shriek of a train whistle and ends with shrieking excitement. Farley Granger, Ruth Norman, Robert Walker. Warner Brothers now bring a pounding new tempo to screen entertainment. It's off the beaten track. That's the movie poster, kind of an ugly orange and white color. It looks like it looks like rainbow sherbet with the orange and white background, and then it's got even more tacky colors on little pieces of paper. I don't know. It's like it's like Zodiac Killer for the movie title. Strangers is on one piece of paper, then Anna is on another piece of paper, and Train is on another piece of paper, and Alfred Hitchcock's is on a fourth piece of paper. What is going on with this movie? And this got Farley Granger smoking a cigarette. He's supposed to be a tennis star, and he's smoking a cigarette. Strangers on a Train is a 1951 U.S. psychological thriller film noir produced and directed by Alfred Hitchcock based on the 1950 novel of the same name by Patricia Highsmith. It was shot in late 1950 and released by Warner Brothers on June 30th, 1951, starring Farley Granger, Ruth Roman, and Robert Walker. The story concerns two strangers who meet on a train, one of whom is a psychopath who suggests that they exchange numbers so that neither will be caught. They exchange murders, not numbers. One of whom is a psychopath who suggests that they exchange murders so that neither will be caught. The film initially received mixed reviews, but has since been regarded much more favorably. Of course, all Hitchcock movies are like that, except for maybe Young and Innocent. In 2021, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Production company Transatlantic Pictures, distributed by Warner Brothers. Release date June 30th, 1951. Running time 101 minutes. Country United States. Language English. A budget of $1.2 million and a box office of $7 million. Which I guess is okay. Not a huge hit in terms of box office receipts. Amateur tennis star Guy Haynes wants to divorce his promiscuous wife, Miriam, so that he can marry Ann Morton, the daughter of a U.S. senator. Then he wants to retire, and he wants to retire from tennis and become a politician. On a train, wealthy, smooth-talking psychopath Bruno Antony recognizes Haynes, and he reveals his idea for a murder scheme. Two strangers meet and swap murders. Bruno suggests he kill Miriam, and Guy kill Bruno's hated father. Each will murder a stranger with no apparent motive, so neither will be suspected. Guy humors Bruno by pretending to find his idea amusing, but is so eager to get away from Bruno that he leaves behind his engraved cigarette lighter. Bad mistake. Do not give your engraved cigarette lighter to Bruno. Guy meets Miriam, who is pregos by somebody else at her workplace in Metcalf, their hometown. I didn't see her pregos bump. I guess they forgot to put a pillow underneath their sweater or whatever. Guy gives her the money she demanded to pay for a divorce lawyer, but Miriam tells him she is no longer interested in divorce. She's just going to use the money to buy a nice dress. And she threatens to claim that he is the father if he pursues a divorce. I guess there's no such thing as a DNA test in 1951. That evening, Bruno follows Miriam to an amusement park, and he strangles her while Guy is on the train to Washington, D.C. So, this is the infamous strangulation scene that I told you about. Hitchcock doesn't waste any time here. When Guy arrives home, Bruno informs him Miriam is dead, and Bruno insists that he must now honor their deal. Good luck with that. Guy goes to the Morton's home where Anne's father informs Guy that his wife has been murdered. Big surprise there. He's trying to pretend like he's surprised. Anne's sister Barbara, played by the great Patricia Hitchcock? Patricia Hitchcock looks good. I like her. She's the reason to watch this movie, Patricia Hitchcock. A little bit chubby, but kind of curvy. And definitely nerdy. And Sister Barbara says that the police will think that Guy is the murderer since he has a motive. Good thinking there. And that's why Guy is kind of tiptoeing on on a bed of nails here. He's in an awkward position. This guy, played by the great Farley Granger. I was disappointed. I love Farley Granger in Rope. I think he was a great actor. He just never got his big break in Hollywood. And it's unfortunate. He's such a great actor. The police question Guy, but the police cannot confirm his Guy's alibi. Professor Guy met on the train was so drunk that he cannot remember their encounter. The police assign an escort to watch him. But Farley Granger is pretty clever. He said, at least the guy knew that he was on the train. He was on the same train. And he knew that the other guy was on the same train. So they must have had a conversation. Anyways. Bruno follows Guy around Washington. Bruno introduces himself to Anne, and he appears at a party at Senator Morton's house. So he's got this little tie clip that says Bruno, and Anne can see quite clearly that he's involved in this somehow. She's starting to get suspicious at at her lover. To amuse another guest, Bruno playfully demonstrates how to strangle a woman. And she's looking at Patricia Hancock. This Bruno guy's totally wacky. Anyways, he's looking at Patricia Hancock while he's strangling this old lady at a cocktail party. He playfully demonstrates how to strangle a woman by just putting his hands around an old woman's neck and he starts squeezing really hard. His gaze falls upon Barbara, whose appearance resembles Miriam's. They both wear glasses. They're both the same height, the same kind of a skin tone, pitch white. This triggers a flashback. Bruno convulsively squeezes the woman's neck, and the other guests intervene to stop him from strangling her to death. Security! Barbara tells Anne that Bruno was looking at her while strangling the other woman, and Anne realizes Barbara's resemblance to Miriam. They both wear glasses. They both have the same figure. They both wear the same clothes. They both have the same skin color. Her suspicions aroused, Anne finally confronts Guy, who tells her the truth about Bruno's scheme. And she's not mad she's not mad at Guy for hiding it from her all this time for some reason. Okay, Bruno sends Guy a package containing a pistol, a house key, and a map showing the location of his father's bedroom. Guy creeps into Bruno's father's room to warn him of his son's murderous attentions, but instead he finds Bruno there waiting for him. Guy tries to persuade Bruno to seek psychiatric help, but Bruno threatens to punish Guy for breaking their deal. He won't shoot Guy in the hallway because his mother might hear the gunfire. Anne visits Bruno's home and tries to explain to his befuddled and besotted mother that her son is a murderer. I think her mother's got dementia or something. Bruno mentioned Guy's missing cigarette lighter to Anne, and Bruno claims that Guy asked him to search the murder site for it. Guy infers that Bruno intends to plant it at the scene of the murder and incriminate him. After winning a tennis match helped by Barbara, Guy evades the police escort, and Guy heads for the amusement park to stop Bruno. Everything is happening so fast. I couldn't understand why he went back to the amusement park until I just read this now. When Bruno arrives at the amusement park, a carnival worker recognizes him from the night of the murder. He informs the police, who think he has recognized Guy. After Guy arrives, he and Bruno fight on the park's carousel. Believing that Guy is trying to escape, a police officer shoots at him, but instead kills the carousel operator, causing the carousel to spin out of control. A carnival worker crawls underneath it. The carnival worker applies the brakes too abruptly, causing the carousel to spin off its support, trapping the mortally injured Bruno underneath. The worker who called the police tells them that Bruno, not Guy, is the one he remembers seeing the night of the murder. As Bruno dies, his fingers unclench to reveal Guy's lighter in his hand. Oh, the good guy wins, no pun intended. Realizing that Guy is not the murderer, the police ask him to come to the station to tie up loose ends. Sometime later, another stranger on the train attempts to strike up a conversation with Guy in the same way as Bruno did. Good luck with that. I just spoiled the ending. And there's nobody in the chat room. Karate Man got tired of being in the chat room 4 times last weekend. Alfred Hitchcock's cameo appearance occurs 11 minutes into the film. He is seen carrying a double bass as he climbs onto a train. Hitchcock said that correct casting saved him a reel of story time, since audiences would sense qualities in the actors that did not have to be spelled out. Hitchcock said that he originally wanted William Holden for the Guy Haynes role, but Holden declined. Holden would have been all wrong, too sturdy, too put off by Bruno, wrote critic Roger Ebert. Granger is softer, more elusive, more convincing as he tries to slip out of Bruno's conversational web instead of flatly rejecting him. He just could have said, "Begone, Satan!" Warner Brothers wanted their own stars already under contract, cast wherever possible. In the casting of Ann Morton, Jack L. Warner got what he wanted when he signed Ruth Roman to the project. Wow, she's a knockout. Over Hitchcock's objections, the director found her bristling and lacking in sex appeal and said that she had been foisted upon him. What is Hitchcock smoking? Is he high? Perhaps it was the circumstances of her forced casting, but Roman became the target of Hitchcock scorn throughout the production. You don't want to mess with Hitchcock. Granger described Hitchcock's attitude towards Roman as disinterest in the actress and said he saw Hitchcock treat Edith Evison the same way on the set of Rope in 1948. So he treats his actresses like little kids. He had to have one person in each film he could harass, Granger said. Oh, poor Ruth Roman. She looks good to me. I don't know what Hitchcock is talking about. Casey Rogers noted that she had the perfect vision at the time the film was made, but Hitchcock insisted she wear the character's thick eyeglasses, even long shots, when regular glass lenses would have been undetectable. Rogers was effectively blind with the glasses on, and she needed to be guided by the other actors. Hitchcock secured the rights to the Patricia Highsmith novel for just $7,500 since it was her first novel. As usual, Hitchcock kept his name out of the negotiations to keep the purchase price low. Highsmith was quite annoyed when she later discovered who had bought the rights for such a small amount. Securing the rights to the novel was the least of the hurdles Hitchcock would have to vault to get the property from printed page to screen. He got a treatment that pleased him on the second attempt from writer Whitfield Cook, who wove a homoerotic subtext into the story. With treatment in hand, Hitchcock shopped for a screenwriter. He wanted a name writer to lend some prestige to the screenplay. But he was turned down by 8 writers, including John Steinbeck and Thornton Wilder, all of whom thought the story too tawdry and were put off by Highsmith's first-timer status. Talks with Dashiell Hammett got further, but here too communications ultimately broke down and Hammett never took the assignment. Hitchcock then tried Raymond Chandler, who had earned an Oscar nomination for his first screenplay, Double Indemnity. Oh, I got to give Raymond Chandler some I forgot to put his name in the description. Written by Raymond Chandler. All right. Well, there are 2 people in the chat room, but nobody's chatting. Hitchcock then tried Raymond Chandler, who had earned an Oscar nomination for his first screenplay, Double Indemnity, in collaboration with Billy Wilder. Double Indemnity should have gotten Best Picture. Another stupid film got Best Picture. It's not even, nobody knows about it now. The other picture that won Best Picture for, I forget what year Double Indemnity came out. Chandler took the job despite his opinion that it was a silly little story. Yeah, that's an understatement. But Chandler was a notorious difficult collaborator, and the 2 men could not have had more different meeting styles. Hitchcock enjoyed long, rambling, off-topic meetings where often the film would not even be mentioned for hours, while Chandler was strictly business, and Chandler wanted to get out and get writing. He called the meetings bad jabber sessions, which seemed to be an inevitable, although painful, part of the picture business. Chandler also felt that the original novel's plot was superior to Hitchcock's version and argued that it should be restored. He complained privately that Hitchcock was too ready to sacrifice dramatic logic insofar as it exists for the sake of a camera effect. Interpersonal relations deteriorated rapidly until finally Chandler became openly combative. At one point, on noticing Hitchcock struggling to exit from his limousine, Chandler remarked within earshot, "Look at the fat bastard trying to get out of his car." That's something you would say to a director. This would be their last collaboration. Yeah, I guess so. Chandler completed a first draft, then wrote a second without hearing a single word back from Hitchcock. When finally he did get a communication from the director in late September, it was his dismissal from the project. Next, Hitchcock tried to hire Ben Hecht, but learned he was unavailable. Hecht suggested his assistant, Senzi Ormode, to write the screenplay, although Ormode was without a formal screen credit, she did have two things in her favor. Her recently published collection of short stories, Laughter from Downstairs, was attracting good notices from critics, and she was a fair haired beauty with long, shimmering hair, always a plus with Hitchcock. With his new writer, he wanted to start from square one. At their first conference, Hitchcock made a show of pinching his nose, then holding up Chandler's draft with his thumb and forefinger and dropping it into the wastebasket. He told the obscure writer that the famous one hadn't written a solitary line he intended to use, and they would have to start all over on page one using Cook's treatment as a guide. The director told Raymond to forget all about the book, then told her the story of the film himself from beginning to end. There was not much time, though, less than 3 weeks until location shooting was scheduled to start in the East. Raymond hunkered down with Hitchcock's associate producer Barbara Kean, disparagingly called Hitchcock's factotum by Chandler, and Alma Reville, Hitchcock's wife. Together, the three women, working under the boss's guidance and late into most nights, finished enough of the script in time to send the company east. The rest was complete by early November. Three notable additions the trio had made were the runaway merry-go-round, the cigarette lighter, and the thick eyeglasses. There was one point of agreement between Chandler and Hitchcock, although it would come only much later. Near the release of the film, they both acknowledged that since virtually none of Chandler's work remained in the final script, his name should be removed from the credits. Hitchcock preferred the writing credit of Whitfield Cook and Crenzy Ormond, but Warner Brothers wanted the catchet of the Chandler name, and Warner Brothers insisted it stay on, which is why I gave him writer's credit just now. Because they didn't eliminate all of his writing, but they made it so bad that it only gets 2 out of 5 stars in my view. Even while the torturous writing stage was plotting its course, the director's excitement about the project was boundless. Hitchcock raced ahead of everyone. The script, the cast, the studio, pieces of the film were dancing like electrical charges in his brain. The more the film resolved in his mind's eye, the more he knew his director of photography would play a critical role in the scene's execution. He found exactly what he needed right on the Warner's lot in the person of staff cameraman Robert Burks, who could continue to work with Hitchcock, shooting every Hitchcock picture through to Marnie, with the exception of Psycho. Low-keyed, mild manners, Burks was a versatile risk-taker with a penchant for moody atmosphere. Burks was an exceptionally apt choice for what would prove to be Hitchcock's most dramatic film in years. The composition's dense, the lighting almost surreal, the optical effects demanding. None was more demanding than Bruno's strangulation of Miriam, shown reflected in her eyeglass lens. It was a kind of shot Hitchcock had been tinkering with for 20 years, and Robert Burks captured it magnificently. I'll agree with that. That was a decent strangulation scene. But other than that, the end and the ending, there's no reason to watch this movie. Burks considered his 14 years with Hitchcock the best of his career. You never have any trouble with him as long as you know your job and do it. Hitchcock insists on perfection. He has no patience with mediocrity on the set or at the dinner table. There can be no compromise in his work, his food, or his wines. Robert Barks received the film's sole Academy Award nomination for its black and white photography. With the cast nailed down, a script in hand, and a director of photography in tune with Hitchcock's vision on board, the company was ready to commence filming. Hitchcock had a crew shot background footage of the 1950 Davis Cup Finals, held August 25th to 27th, 1950, at the Westside Tennis Club in Forest Hills, New York. And you can tell that the tennis player is not Farley Granger. While there, the crew had done some other location scouting. Exteriors would be shot on both coasts and interiors on Warner Brothers sound stages. Hitchcock and his cast and crew decamped for the East Coast on October 17, 1950. For 6 days, they shot at Penn Station in New York City, at the railroad station at Danbury, Connecticut, which became Guy's hometown of Metcalf, and in spots around Washington, D.C. By month's end, they were back in California. Hitchcock had written exacting specifications for an amusement park, which was constructed on the ranch of director Roland Lee in Chatsworth, California. The amusement park exteriors were shot there, and an actual tunnel of love at the fairground in Canoga Park, California. Hitchcock had always shot the long shots for the tennis match at Forest Hills and would add closer shots with Granger and Jack Cushingham, Granger's tennis coach, off screen, and Guy's tennis opponent Fred Reynolds on screen at a tennis club in Southgate, California. The rest of the shooting would take place on Warner's sound stages, including many seemingly exterior and on-location shots that were actually done inside in front of rear projection screens. Strangers on a Train marked something of a renaissance for Hitchcock after several years of low enthusiasm for his late 1940s output, and he threw himself into the micromanagement of some of its production. Hitchcock himself designed Bruno's lobster necktie, revealed in a close-up to have a strangling lobster claws, and he personally selected an orange peel, a chewing gum wrapper, wet leaves, and a bit of crumpled paper that were used for sewer debris in the scene where Bruno inadvertently drops Guy's lighter down the storm drain. I was wondering why he was digging in the storm drain. I guess I missed the part where he dropped his lighter. He also showed intense interest in seldom considered detail of character delineation. Food preferences and food characterize people, Hitchcock said. I have always given it careful consideration so that my characters never eat out of character. Bruno orders with gusto and with an interest in what he is going to eat: lamb chops, fries, and chocolate ice cream. Very good choice for train food. And the chocolate ice cream is probably what he thought about first. Bruno is rather a child. He is also something of a hedonist. Guy, on the other hand, shows little interest in eating lunch, apparently having given it no advanced thought, in contrast to Bruno, and he merely orders what seems his routine choice: a hamburger and coffee. One of the most memorable single shots in the Hitchcock canon. It is studied by film classes, says Casey Rogers, who played Miriam, is her character's strangulation by Bruno on the Magic Isle. Hitchcock and Barks collaborated on a double printing technique to create this iconic shot, still studied in film schools today. The slow, almost graceful murder is shown as a reflection in the victim's eyeglasses, not sunglasses, in the victim's eyeglasses, which have been jarred loose from her head and dropped to the ground. The unusual angle was a more complex proposition than it seems. First, Hitchcock got exterior shots in Canoga Park using both actors. Then later, he had Rogers alone report to a soundstage where there was a large concave reflector set on the floor. The camera was on one side of the reflector, Rogers was on the other, and Hitchcock directed Rogers to turn her back to the reflector and float backwards all the way to the floor like you were doing the limbo. The first 6 takes went badly. Rogers thudded to the floor with several feet yet to go, but on the 7th take, she floated smoothly all the way. Hitchcock's even strained response cut next shot. Hitchcock then had 2 elements ingeniously double printed, yielding a shot of oddly appearing originality with a stark fusion of the grotesque and the beautiful. The aestheticizing of the horror somehow enables the audience to contemplate more fully its reality. It's so sudden and it happens so fast. Basically, she and her 2 boyfriends get off the boat from the tunnel of love. And you don't even realize that they're separated until she gets strangulated. So once again, everything is going so fast, it's hard to keep track of what's actually going on. Hitchcock was above all the master of great visual set piece, and perhaps the most memorable sequence in Strangers on the Train is the climactic fight on a berserk carousel. While Guy and Bruno fight, the ride runs out of control until it tears itself to pieces, flinging wooden horses into a crowd of screaming mothers and squealing children. The climactic carousel explosion was a marvel of miniatures and background projection, acting close-ups and other inserts, all of it seamlessly matched and blended under film editor William H. Ziegler's eye. Hitchcock took a toy carousel and photographed it blown up by a small charge of explosives. This piece of film he then enlarged and projected onto a vast screen, positioning actors around and in front of it so that the effect is one of the mob of bystanders into which the plaster horses and passengers are hurled in deadly chaos. It is one of the moments in Hitchcock's work that continues to bring gasp from every audience and applause from cinema students. The explosion is triggered by the attempts of a carnival man to stop the ride after crawling under the whirling carousel deck to get to the controls in the center, although Hitchcock admitted to undercranking the shot, artificially accelerating the action. It was not a trick shot. The man actually had to crawl under the spinning ride, just inches from possible injury. Hitchcock told me that this scene was the most personally frightening moment for him in any of his films, writes biographer Charlotte Chandler. The man who crawled under the out-of-control carousel was not an actor or a stuntman, but a carousel operator who volunteered for the job. If the man had raised his head even slightly, Hitchcock said it would have gone from being a suspense film into a horror film. The final scene of the so-called U.S. version of the film has Barbara and Ann Morton waiting for Guy to call on the telephone. Hitchcock wanted the phone in the foreground to dominate the shot, emphasizing the importance of the call, but the limited depth of field of contemporary motion picture lenses made it difficult to get both phone and women in focus. So Hitchcock had an oversized phone constructed and placed in the foreground and reaches for the big phone, but actually answers a regular one. I did that on one take, Hitchcock explained, by moving in on Anne so that the big phone went out of frame as she reached for it. Then a grip put a normal size phone on the table where she picked it up. Principal photography wrapped just before Christmas, and Hitchcock and Alma left for vacation in Santa Cruz. Then in late 1951, on to St. Maurice for a 25th anniversary European excursion. Composer Dmitri Tiomkin was Jack Warner's choice to score Strangers on a Train, while he had previous Hitchcock experience on Shadow of a Doubt, 1943, and would go on to score two more consecutive Hitchcock films. The director and composer simply never developed much of a kinship, and the Hitchcock films are not Tompkins' best. Nonetheless, the score does pick up the ubiquitous theme of doubles, often contrasting doubles, right from the opening title sequence. The massive granite edifice of New York's Pennsylvania Station, standing in for Washington's Union Station, because it was scored for an unusually large orchestra, including alto, tenor, and baritone saxes, 3 clarinets, 4 horns, 3 pianos, and a novochord. Tiomkin's contrasting musical themes contained throughout the film, delineating 2 characters with substantial differences. For Guy's theme, Tiomkin created a hesitant, passive idea made to order music for Farley Granger's performance. Bruno, who tells Guy on the train that he admires people who do things, gets a more vigorous musical treatment from Tiomkin. Harmonic complexity defines the motifs associated with Bruno: rumbling bass, shocking clusters, and glassy string harmonics. These disturbing sounds heard to superb effect in cues such as the meeting, Senator's office, and Jefferson Memorial are not just about Bruno, but about how he is perceived by those whose lives he crosses. First Guy, then everyone in Guy's entourage. But perhaps the most memorable music in Strangers is the colloque music, heard first at the fairground and again later when Bruno is strangling Miss Cunningham at Senator Morton's sorry, and experiences his unfortunate flashback and subsequent fainting spell. It was Hitchcock, not Tiomkin, whose idea brought the 4 evocative numbers. The band played on Carolina in the Morning, Oh You Beautiful Doll, and Babyface to the soundtrack. It is in one of Hitchcock's most explicit operatic gestures. The characters at the Faithful Carnival sing the score, giving it full dimension as part of the drama. In a conventional movie, the tune would play in the background as a clever, ironic backdrop, but Hitchcock takes music to another level. Miriam and the 2 boyfriends in her odd menage a trois bring the band played on to life by singing it on the merry-go-round lustily and loudly, grinning balefully on the horse behind them. Bruno then sings it himself, making it his motto. The band plays on through Bruno's stalking of his victim, and during the murder itself, blaring from the front of the screen, then receding into darkness as the eerie obbligato when the doomed Miriam enters the tunnel of love. The band played on makes its final reprise during Guy's and Bruno's fight on the merry-go-round, even itself shifting to a faster tempo. and higher pitch when the policeman's bullet hits the ride operator and sends the carousel into frenzy's hyperdrive. Well, I guess that policeman is not a good marksman. Critic Jake Sullivan had kinder words for Tiomkin's score for Strangers than did biographer Spotto. So seamlessly and inevitably does it fit the picture's design that it seems like an element of Hitchcock's storyboards, he writes. It's a score that goes largely uncelebrated. With a release scheduled for early summer, the studio press agent swung into high gear early in 1951. Hitchcock promotionally photographed many times over the years, strangling for various actors and other women, some one-handed, others two, found himself in front of the camera with his fingers around the neck of a bust of daughter Patricia. The photo found its way into newspapers nationwide. He was also photographed adding the letter L to Strangers on the official studio poster for the film, thus changing the word to Stranglers. One studio press release gave rise to a myth that still lingers on today. Hitchcock and Patricia both were afraid of heights, and father offered daughter $100 to ride the Ferris wheel, only to order the power cut, leaving her in the dark at the very top of the ride. The press release embellished the tale, claiming he left her dangling in total darkness for an hour, only then allowing his trembling daughter to be lowered and released. Although that account continues to be published in books to this day, it just wasn't true, according to Patricia Hitchcock. O'Connell, first of all, she was not up there alone. Flanking her were the actors playing Miriam's two boyfriends, and I have a picture of us waving. This was good stuff for press agents paid to stir up thrills, and it has been repeated in other books to bolster the idea of Hitchcock's sadism. But we were only up there for 2 to 3 minutes. At the outside, my father wasn't ever sadistic. The only sadistic part I never got the $100. The only sadistic part was I never got the $100, she said. Strangers on a Train previewed on March 5th, 1951 at the Huntington Park Theater with Alma, Jack Warner, Whitfield, Cook, and Barbara Kean in the Hitchcock party, and it won a prize from the Screen Directors Guild. It premiered in New York on July 3rd, marking the reopening of the extensively remodeled Strand Theater as the Warner Theater, and in a dozen cities around the country. Hitchcock made personal appearances in most of them and was often accompanied by his daughter. Some audience feedback arriving at Jack Warner's office condemned the film for its sordid story, while just as many others were favorable. Of greater interest to Warner was the box office take, and the receipts soon told the true story. Strangers on a Train was a success, and Hitchcock was pronounced at the top of his form as master of the dark, melodramatic suspense thriller. So it was somewhat of a success. I guess I was looking at the figures here, and I was thinking in terms of today's dollars. But in 1951, $7 million was a lot of money back then. The film includes a number of puns and visual metaphors that demonstrate a running motif of crisscross, double crossing, and crossing one's double. Talking about the structure of the film, Hitchcock said to Truffaut, "Isn't it a fascinating design? One could study it forever. The two characters, Guy and Bruno, can be viewed as doppelgangers. As with Shadow of a Doubt, Strangers on the Train is one of many Hitchcock films to explore the doppelganger theme. The pair has what writer Peter Delolio refers to as a dark symbiosis. Bruno embodies Guy's dark desire to kill Miriam, a real life incarnation of Guy's wish fulfillment fantasy. The theme of doubles is a key element in the film's structure, and Hitchcock starts right off in his title sequence making this point. There are two taxi cabs, two red caps, two pairs of feet, two sets of train rails that cross twice. Once on the train, Bruno orders a pair of double drinks. The only kind of doubles I play, he says charmingly. In Hitchcock's cameo, he carries a double bass. There are two respectable and influential fathers, two women with eyeglasses, and two women at a party who delight in thinking of ways of committing the perfect crime. There are two sets of two detectives in two cities, two little boys at the two trips to the playground, two old men at the carousel, two boyfriends accompanying the woman about to be murdered, and two Hitchcocks in the film. Hitchcock carries the theme into his editing, cross-cutting between Guy and Bruno with the words and gestures. One asks the time, and the other, miles away, looks at his watch. One says in anger, "I could strangle her," and the other, far distance, makes a choking gesture. This doubling had some precedent in the novel, but more of it was deliberately added by Hitchcock, dictating it in rapid and inspired profusion to Cindy Ormond and Barbara Keown during the last days of script preparation. It undergirds the whole film because it finally serves to associate the world of light, order, and vitality with the world of darkness, chaos, lunacy, and death. Guy and Bruno are in some ways doubles, but in many more ways, they are opposites. The two sets of feet in the title sequence match each other in motion and cutting, but they immediately establish contrast between the two men. The first shoes showy, vulgar brown and white brogues. The second plain, unadorned walking shoes. They also demonstrate Hitchcock's gift for deft visual storytelling. For most of the film, Bruno is the actor, Guy the reactor, and Hitchcock always shows Bruno's feet first, then Guy's. And since it is Guy's foot that taps Bruno's under the table, we know Bruno has not engineered the meaning. Roger Ebert wrote that is this sense of two flawed characters, one evil, one weak, with an unstated sexual tension that makes the movie intriguing and halfway plausible, and explains how Bruno could come so close to carrying out his plan. It is those flaws that set up the real themes of Strangers. It was not enough for Hitchcock to construct merely a world of doubles, even contrasting doubles, in a strictly polar opposite structure. For Hitchcock, the good and evil, darkness and light poles didn't have to be mutually exclusive. Blurring the lines puts both Guy and Bruno on a good-evil continuum, and the infinite shades of gray in between became Hitchcock's canvas for telling the story and painting his characters. At first glance, Guy represents the ordered life where people stick to rules. Comes from the world of chaos, where they get thrown out of multiple colleges for drinking and gambling. Yet both men, like so many of Hitchcock's protagonists, are insecure and uncertain of their identity. Guy is suspended between tennis and politics, between his tramp wife and his senator's daughter. And Bruno is seeking desperately to establish an identity through violent outre actions and flamboyance. Shoes, lobster, patterned tie, name proclaimed to the world on his tie pin. Bruno tells Guy early on that he admires him. I certainly admire people who do things, he says. Me, I never do anything important. Yet, as Bruno describes his theories over lunch, Guy responds to Bruno. We see it in his face, at once amused and tense. To the man committed to a career in politics, Bruno represents a tempting overthrow of all responsibility. And at this point, the blurring of good and evil accelerates. Guy fails to repudiate Bruno's suggestive statement about murdering Miriam. What's a life or two, guys? Some people are better off dead. With any force or conviction, when Bruno openly suggests he would like to kill his wife, he merely grins and says, that's a morbid thought, but we sense the tension that underlies it. It ratchets up a notch when Guy leaves Bruno's compartment and forgets his cigarette lighter. He's leaving, and Bruno's keeping his link with Anne, his possibility of climbing in the ordered existence to which he aspires. Guy then, in a sense, connives at the murder of his wife, and the enigmatic link between him and Bruno becomes clear. Having given his characters overlapping qualities of good and evil, Hitchcock then rendered them on screen according to a very strict template with which he stuck to a remarkable degree. Ebert wrote, Hitchcock was a classical technician in terms of controlling his visuals, and his use of screen space underlined the tension in ways the audience isn't always aware of. He always used the convention that the left side of the screen is for evil or weaker characters, while the right is for characters who are either good or temporarily dominant. All right. Nowhere is this more evident than the scene where Guy arrives home at his DC apartment to find Bruno lurking across the street. Bruno killed Miriam that evening in Metcalf and has her glasses to give to Guy almost as a receipt that he had executed his part of their deal, quote unquote. On one side of the street are stately, respectable houses towering in the background. On the far right of the screen, the floodlit dome of the U.S. Capitol, the life to which Guy aspires, the world of light and order. I thought it was the belly of the beast. Bruno tells Guy what he has done, and Bruno gives him the glasses. You're a free man now, he says, just as a police car drives up, looking for a husband of a certain recent murder victim. Guy nervously steps into the shadows with Bruno, literally behind the bars of an iron fence. You got me acting like a criminal, he says. The scene gives a beautiful, exact, symbolic expression to Guy's relationship with Bruno and what he stands for. Hitchcock continues the interplay of light and dark throughout the film. Guy's bright, light tennis attire versus the gothic gloominess of Bruno's Arlington mansion, the cross-cutting between his game and the sunshine at Forest Hills, while Bruno's arm stretches into the dark and debris of the storm drain to fish out the cigarette lighter. Even a single image where Walker is photographed is one visually stunning shot as a malignant stain on the purity of the white marble Jefferson Memorial, as a blot on the order of things. Although its first rumblings came in 1947 with the trial and conviction of the Hollywood 10, the so-called Red Scare was gathering steam in 1950 with the espionage relating arrests of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg and the trial of Alger Hiss. These events were the background to their work, while Hitchcock, Cook, Ormond, and Keown were preparing the script for Strangers. And film scholar Roger L. Carringer has written of the political subtext to the film. Treatment writer Cook used Guide to make a film, a parable quietly defiant of the Cold War hysteria sweeping America. Oh, great. So we have a pro-communist movie here. That hysteria was targeting homosexuals along with communists as enemies of the state. They are enemies of the state. They're enemies of God and everything else that God owns. The U.S. said it was busy investigating the suspicion that moral perverts in the government were also undermining national security, going so far as to commission a study, employment of homosexuals and other sex perverts in government. Now, that's a great government study. They should do that now. Carringer has argued that the film was critically shaped by the congressional inquiries, making Guy the stand-in for victims of the homophobic climate. To all appearances, Guy is the all-American stereotype, an athlete unassuming despite his fame, conservatively dressed, wrote Carringer. He is a man of indeterminate sexual identity, found in circumstances making him vulnerable to being compromised. Hitchcock, who had drawn gay characters so sharply and yet subtly in Rope in 1948, drafted the left-leaning Cook expressly because he was comfortable with sexually ambiguous characters. Even before sewing up the rights for the novel, Hitchcock's mind was whirling with ideas about how to adopt it for the screen. He narrowed the geographic scope to the northeast corridor between Washington, D.C. and New York. The novel ranged from the Southwest and Florida, among other locales. The scripting team added the tennis match and the cross-cutting with Bruno's storm drain, Travails and Metcalf, added the cigarette lighter, the tunnel of love, Miriam's eyeglasses. In fact, the amusement park is only a brief setting in the novel. Hitchcock's biggest changes were in his two lead characters. The character is called Bruno Anthony in the film. Is called Bruno Anthony Bruno. The character called Bruno Anthony in the film is called Charles Anthony Bruno in the book. In the book, Bruno dies in a boating accident far removed from a merry-go-round. In the novel, Guy Haynes is not a tennis player, but rather a promising architect, and he does indeed go through the murder of Bruno's father. In the movie, Guy became a decent guy who refuses to carry out his part of the crazed bargain, writes Patrick McGilligan, to head off the censors. In the novel, Guy is pursued and entrapped by a tenacious detective. Sounds like the novel is the one to check out, not this movie. The merry-go-round scene is not in the book, but is taken from the climax of Edmund Crispin's 1946 novel, The Moving Toy Shop. As the major elements of the scene, the two men struggling the accidentally shot attendant, the out-of-control merry-go-round, the crawling under the moving merry-go-round to disable it are present in Crispin's account, though he received no screen credit for it. Upon its release in 1951, Strangers on a Train received mixed reviews. Variety praised it, writing performance-wise. The cast comes through strongly. Granger is excellent as the harassed young men innocently involved in murder. Roman's role as a nice, understanding girl is a switch for her, and she makes it warmly effective. Walker's role has extreme color, and he projects it deftly. Conversely, Bosley Crowler of the New York Times criticized the film. Mr. Hitchcock again is tossing a crazy murder story in the air and trying to con us into thinking that it will stand up without support. Perhaps there will be those in the audience who will likewise be terrified by the villain's darkly menacing warnings and by Mr. Hitchcock's sleekly melodramatic tricks. But for all that, his basic premise of fear, fired by menace, is so thin and so utterly unconvincing that the story just does not stand. Leslie Hollywell felt that Hitchcock was at his best and that the film makes superior suspense entertainment, but called the story unsatisfactory. In contrast, modern reviews have been overwhelmingly positive. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of a whopping 98% based on reviews from 52 critics, with an average rating of another whopping 8.8 out of 10. The website's consensus reads, a provocative premise and inventive set design lights the way for Hitchcock's diabolically entertaining masterpiece. Metacritic, which uses weighted average, assigned the film a score of 88 out of 100 based on 15 critics, indicating universal acclaim. Roger Ebert has called Strangers on the Train a first-rate thriller that he considers one of Hitchcock's 5 best films. He added the film in his great movies list. And don't listen to Roger Ebert. The Guardian praised the film, writing Hitchcock's studies of the guilt that taints the human condition is just one cinematic masterstroke after another. David Keyes, writing at Cinemaphile in 2002, saw the film as a seminal entry in its genre. Aside from its very evident approach as a crowd-pleasing popcorn flick, the movie is one of the original shells for identity-inspired mystery thrillers in which natural human behavior is the driving force behind the true macabre rather than supernatural elements. Even classic endeavors like Fargo and A Simple Plan seem directly fueled by this concept. Almar Haflidason was effusive about Strangers on a Train in 2001 at the BBC website. Hitchcock's favorite device of an ordinary man caught in an ever-tightening web of fear plunges Guy into one of the director's most fiendishly effective movies. Ordinary Washington locations become sinister hunting grounds that mirror perfectly the creeping terror that slowly consumes Guy as the lethally smooth Bruno relentlessly pursues him to a frenzied climax. Fast, exciting, and woven with wicked style, this is one of Hitchcock's most efficient and ruthlessly delicious thrillers. Patrick Highsmith's opinion of the film varied over time. She initially praised it, writing, "I'm pleased in general, especially with Bruno, who held the movie together as he did the book." Later in life, while still praising Robert Walker's performance of Bruno, she criticized the casting of Ruth Roman as Anne, Hitchcock's decision to turn Guy from an architect into a tennis player, and the fact that Guy does not murder Bruno's father as he does in the novel. All very good points. But Ruth Roman is just there for eye candy. She's not there to prove her acting skills. According to Warner Brothers records, the film earned $1,788,000 domestically and $1,144,000 in foreign territories. This was nominated for Academy Award Best Cinematography by Robert Burks. It was also nominated for Directors Guild of America Award, Outstanding Directing Feature Film. And lastly, it was nominated by National Board of Review Award for Best Film. American Film Institute listed the film as number 32 in AFI's 100 Years, 100 Thrills. An early preview edit of the film, sometimes labeled the British version, although it was never released in Britain or anywhere else, includes some scenes either not in or different from the film as released. According to biographer Charlotte Chandler, Lynn Erhard, Hitchcock himself did not like either the British or the American version. Hitchcock told Chandler that the picture should have ended with Guy at the amusement park after he has been cleared of murdering his wife. He wanted the last line of the film to be Guy describing Bruno as a very clever fellow. This ending, however, was not acceptable to Warner Brothers. In 1997, Warner released the film onto DVD as a double-sided disc with the British version on one side and the Hollywood version on the reverse. Between the two versions of the film, the British version most prominently omits the final scene on the train. A two-disc DVD version was released in 2004 containing both versions of the film, this time with the British version titled Preview Version 102 to 49 long, and the Hollywood version titled Final Release Version 100 to 40 long. The film was later made available on Blu-ray in 2012 with the same contents as the 2004 DVD edition. Strangers on the Train was adopted for a radio program, Lux Radio Theater, on two occasions on December 3rd, 1951, with Ruth Roman, Frank Lovejoy, and Ray Milland, and on April 12th, 1954, with Virginia Mayo, Dana Andrews, and Robert Cummings. BBC's Radio 4's afternoon play broadcast on September 29, 2011, was Strangers on a Film by Stephen Wyatt, which gives an imagined account of a series of meetings between Hitchcock, Clive Swift, and Raymond Chandler, Patrick Stewart, as they unsuccessfully attempt to create this screenplay for Strangers on a Train. The 1987 film Throw Mama from the Train by Danny DeVito was inspired by Strangers on the Train, which also watched by DeVito's character in the film, which is also watched by DeVito's character in the film. A television film remake, Once You Meet a Stranger, was written and directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, and it aired on CBS on September 25th, 1996. The film switches the genders of the main characters from male to female, and it stars Jacqueline Bisset and Teresa Russell. The 2022 Netflix original Do Revenge has a plot inspired by Strangers on a Train. In the film, two classmates conspire to take down the other's enemy as revenge, In 2021, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. In 2022, Time Out ranked the film at number 75 on their list of the best 100 best thriller films of all time. Wow, this movie is overhyped. I'm an hour 13 minutes into this review, and I just finished Wikipedia portion of it. Strangers on a Train, 1951, rated PG, 1 hour 41 minutes. Gets a whopping 7.9 out of 10 on IMDb, 145,000 ratings. A psychopath tries to forcibly persuade a tennis star to agree to his theory that two strangers can get away with murder by submitting to his plan to kill the other's most hated person. All right, here's a more flattering review from Alice Liddell. Alice Liddell gives us a 10 out of 10 on IMDb. Alice, she calls it a magnificent absurdist fantasy. Okay. One would have expected Hitchcock's return to major studio filmmaking to err on the side of chastened caution. What is going on with this? Why can I not click on it? I don't know. It's not letting me click on the Alice Liddell review. More Like This Rope, my favorite Hitch movie of all time. Notorious. Dial M for Murder, which is an overrated Hitchcock film. And then we've got Shadow of a Doubt, which is another great film. Of these, I say Rope and Shadow of a Doubt are the best by far. Oh, here we go with Alice Liddell's review. Surely few expected his most riotous, unrestrained film, a gleeful melange of vicious black comedy, exciting suspense, mocking manipulation, and astonishing flights of fancy. But that is precisely what they got. Strangers on a Train. What is remarkable is how much Bruno's transgression disrupts the world of the film. Much has been made of the masterly cross-cutting motif, but its immediate effect is to completely obstruct the straight line of progress Guy is making of his life, and hence the society he represents or is eager to join. Guy is the archetypal U.S. citizen, the working class boy made good, moving in influential circles, athletic, successful, handsome. Bruno is his destructive opposite, gay, decadent, European. He lives off his father in a big house, and he just lounges about dreaming of murder. Bruno's life is one of repetition, circularity, whereas Guy moves straight ahead. It is Bruno's achievement to move Guy into his realm, represented by the merry-go-round, and force him to transgress, break the law, hope for murder. Bruno's quite literally fighting patriarchy. All the authority figures in the film are criticized. Bruno's father, a man whose brutality we get a glimpse of, but the true horror of which is constantly alluded to in the film, especially in Aunt Clara's paintings. That incredibly intense negative energy must have come from somewhere. Anna's incredibly Machiavellian, self serving father, insensitive judge who thinks nothing of lynching after an execution, the tennis commentator whose smugly authoritative comments are always mistaken, far from being the mother hater of legend. Hitch, as Robin Wood, perceived as deeply hostile to fathers and patriarchy. Oh, isn't that nice? Now we have a feminist or an effeminate Alfred Hitchcock. Bruno's transgression turns the world topsy turvy. This is Hitch's most surreal film. Whenever Guy is in his plot, he is filmed straight with conventionally romantic music. But whenever Bruno intrudes, the atmosphere becomes carnivalesque, bizarre, much more fun. This is Hitch's first truly U.S. film, reveling in the primitive detritus of Americana, whatever that is. Grown men puncture little boys' balloons or try to throw them off merry-go-rounds. Distinguished professors of mathematics sing about goats on trains. Elderly society matrons are strangled at elegant stories. Watching this film like a series of spare lines in a vast desert under a huge sky like a haunting Dali painting. There is one of the greatest and funniest scenes in all cinema when we see motionless, smiling Bruno in a sea of turning heads at a tennis match, an image worthy of Margaret. Just look at any scene with Bruno in it and watch it in derail into the bizarre. Fallacies abound in the most ridiculous permutations. Check out all those balloons. Hitch had obviously just seen The Third Man, as well as in more staid environs. Washington Will Never Look the Same Again. Strangers is also vertical, notwithstanding Hitch's most overtly sexual film, as well as all the phalluses. There is a sustained homoerotism, the remarkable play with riding horses, the gobsmacking fellatio joke when Hitchcock's daughter spills powder over the policeman. And yet Hitch doesn't stint on good old suspense. In the very proper endeavor to show what a great artist he was, critics tend to overlook what made him famous in the first place. Much has been made of Bruno as a prototype of Norman Bates, and Hitch plays merry havoc on audience identification, willing Bruno into murder. There is a hilariously painful sequence where Bruno loses the lighter with which he intends to frame Guy down a drain. The gasp of tension and sighs of relief on the part of the audience I was a part of in support of an insane murderer is inherently funny, slightly disturbing, and highly revealing about our true reactions to conformity and success. And Hitch milks it with a callous glee. Listen to the mocking music and exaggerating compositions and kick yourself for taking it all too serious, so seriously. Strangers is one of Hitch's 5 best films, and there I disagree with that. Maybe 5 worst, and therefore one of the greatest things in cinema. The dialogue is so strange and brilliant. I can't believe it wasn't written by Chandler. Patricia Hitchcock is a wonderful imp standing in for her cheeky father as she taunts the guy. Like I said, Patricia Hitchcock is the reason to watch this. I couldn't get into the Farley Granger guy. I just couldn't. The Fairground finale is a remarkable, dizzying fusion of exciting, tense set piece, black comedy, and symbolic sight. If Bruno's final words condemn him to hell, according to all the Catholic precepts Hitch is supposed to embody, compare with a similar ending in The Killers. We applaud his integrity, infinitely preferable to Guy's debased serving of self. Well, that's an interesting take. Maybe I didn't like that guy character because he's just, I don't know, he wants to be popular, he wants to be in the public eye, he wants the best looking wife. But he's not about to engage in murder to get what he wants. Some posters showed Sir Alfred Hitchcock inserting the letter L into the strangers in the title to make stranglers. The openings in the sewer grate where Bruno drops the lighter are too small for Bruno's arm, especially wearing his suit coat, to get through for him to reach the lighter. Here's some quotes from Senator Morton and Barbara Morton. Senator Morton, dreadful, dreadful business. Poor unfortunate girl. Barbara Morton, she was a tramp. Senator Morton, she was a human being. Let me remind you that even the most unworthy of us has a right to life and the pursuit of happiness. Barbara Morton says, from what I hear, she pursued it in all directions. Pretty funny dialogue there, I have to admit. Still nobody in the chat room. There are several differences in the British version of the film, including the first encounter between Bruno and Guy on the train is longer, and it features a more obvious homoerotic flirtation by Bruno. In the scene where Guy sneaks out of his apartment to go to Bruno's house. What? IMDb just brought me to the Goose page. What's that? Here I go. All right, back to alternate versions. In the scene where Guy sneaks out of his apartment to go to Bruno's house, a shot of him opening a drawer, To get the map Bruno sketched is added. The very last scene in the US version, which involves a clergyman, was deleted. This was edited into My Son John 1952. Soundtracks the band played on 1895. The band played on 1895. Music by Chas B. Ward and lyrics by John F. Palmer. Sung by Casey Rogers, Tommy Farrell. Roland Morris and Robert Walker, while riding the merry-go-round, played often throughout the picture. All right, so there you have it. 1 hour, 40 minutes of torture. Not a great film. Not one of Hitchcock's best. I don't know why people like it so much. I guess because Bruno's gay. I don't know. And yeah, I would say just check out the strangulation scene about 11 minutes in, and then check out the ending and skip the rest of the movie. That's my suggestion. Let's see what's coming down the pike on my list. Now I'm up over an hour, 30 minutes talking about this stupid movie. At least it was free on Tubi. If I'm going to watch a Hitchcock film, I want it to be free, man. I want to pay $3.99 on YouTube or Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime doesn't even play the rolling credits at the end. All right. Number 1 on my list is Jungle Bride, 1933. Number 2 is Kickboxer 3, The Art of War, 1992. And number 3 is Frenzy, 1972. So those are the next 3 on my list. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to include your comments. And have a great evening. Laters.